Hello, my name is Raphael, and this is my presentation about developing ping pong hall attendance in the northwest suburbs of Illinois. First off, why did I pick ping pong? Well, there's a couple of good reasons. The first one being that it's fun, of course, and it's fun for all ages. It's also rising in popularity. It's also a good way to connect young people to other young people as well. A lot of the younger generation is looking for things to do that involve interacting with others outside of the digital space. And they're looking for places to hang out that aren't shopping malls or other places where you're just spending money the whole time. It's also an intergenerational sport because a lot of the older generation also plays it because it was popular during their time. So it's a good way to connect with older generations as well. It also has a lot of business potential for a few reasons. The first one being that it is relatively inexpensive to set up and run. All you really need is a space and a table with a net. There's no really, and I guess somebody to watch over it. There's not really more equipment cost than just that, or there's also like not really any consumable costs or operating costs other than like the rent and maybe some basic upkeep. And also another business potential aspect is that you can sell other products along with the ping pong tickets, I guess, such as like drinks, beer. Doesn't even have to be alcohol necessarily. It could also be like Gatorade, stuff like that. So to solve this problem, we're going to be using the design theory approach. And it's broken into 6 steps, which are empathize, define problems, ideate, prototype, test, and implement. Starting with the first step, which is empathizing, we're going to start off by empathizing with our customers slash players. And we recognize that there are a lot of new players because of this rise in popularity for a number of factors, and they're all looking for somewhere to play. However, this is very difficult for them to find because there are very few searchable places on things like Google Maps, Yelp, whatever site you use. And this is because a number of reasons that I will get into in the next slide. There are also these places that are listed, which are very few and far in between. They have very weird slash specific hours. So, for example, like a place could be open on like Mondays and Wednesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Like very tiny windows of operation. And the current model relies on word of mouth for discovery. So if you want to find out what places are around you that you can play at, you need to know people that are already playing, which is hard for new players, of course. So now on the flip side, for empathizing with businesses, we recognize that the current player base is older, which means that the owners of these places are also older. There's also a very tight knit niche community when it comes to ping pong because of this. Um, and this is part of the reason why these places are not listed, as I mentioned before, and they rely on word of mouth. Also, another factor to consider is that for these businesses, any sort of change offers a lot of uncertainty because people that are used to, for example, going to ping pong Mondays and Wednesdays from 3 to 5, maybe they're not going to be willing to change that to another day or a different time. So there is also that risk. And now the next step after that is defining the problem. And that begins with the problem statement. And I created this statement that kind of tries to encompass all of these aspects of the problem and the issues. And it is that new table tennis players have a hard time finding places to play because existing places are hard to find online and have limited hours due to the businesses already having an established customer base that knows about them and already has the time set aside to play. So the customer base that is older and they're like tight knit, they already have their like schedule set up for this, which is part of the issue. Now, for some of the solutions, I broke it down into the three major problems, which are the searchability problem, the uncertainty problem, and the problem of the hours of operation. Excuse me. First off, the searchability problem is probably the easiest to come up with solutions for. The most obvious one is just creating profiles on all the major platforms like Google Maps, Yelp, Apple Maps, what have you, and maintaining good contact info in these platforms and these profiles. So, like phone numbers, maybe a website, an email, things that will actually get answers when people have questions, and continue to update the information on there. So, whether that's hours or the contact information that I mentioned before, or other stuff as well, like pricing, stuff like that. Keep everything up to date on those profiles. Then there's the hours of operation problem. And the most obvious solution is extending the hours. But obviously that comes with some costs. Of course, it costs money to open a place or stay open. So extending the hours could come at a cost. However, a lot of these places are run by the owners. So like they're the ones that are managing it at the same time. So they don't have to pay a salary for somebody to keep it open. Therefore, the costs are lower. And like we mentioned, the costs of running the ping pong hall are not that high. So this is actually a very viable solution as long as we play it smart. And with that goes coordinating the efforts of multiple businesses. So the idea is that you would have one hall open any day of the week rather than having a place that stays open on 5 days a week and on the weekends, which of course is not ideal because you're like spreading yourself too thin. You could have a place down the street that is open on Mondays and Wednesdays, then another place that's open Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then both of them are open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Or maybe not Sundays, because, nobody wants to go out on a Sunday. But that's the idea. And then, yeah, the busy days are shared by all of them. Then this could also expand to multiple places so that you could coordinate even your hours. So you could have a place that's open on Mondays from 9 to noon, then a place that's like noon to 3, 3 to, so on and so forth, if this is a scalable model. And the final problem is the uncertainty problem, which is you can solve it by talking to the current players, see what they think of these changes, get the input from them of what they think, what hours would be good for them, and then just keep them informed about all the changes. So, for example, if you're gonna, well, we'll get into this later, but I'll give a sneak peek. If you're gonna change your hours because you're gonna be closing on certain days that your players are used to going to your place for, you could point them to the other place, and then that place could point them to your place. That goes along with coordinating the hours. Next up is the prototype, and while there's nothing physical here, I made a prototype of like how you could begin implementing this in a smaller way to test out everything that's going on. So you would start out with 2 or 3 stores or halls, and you would first test out going on those platforms, which would be the easiest thing to test out. The next step after that would be to communicate with the regulars about what days and times they would like to play. Like, obviously, the days that they're already going to, they're available, but you could also ask them what other days and times they would like. Maybe when they're free and they want a place to play, but no place is open. So you could survey that and then bring that to a meeting with the other businesses and end up deciding what days your place would open, which days it would close, and what new days your place would open and the other places would open. And this way you could plan to stagger the days, like I said before. And then after that, you would let the regulars know, hey, we're no longer going to be open on Wednesdays. Instead, the other place is going to be offering on Wednesdays. We're going to be now opening on Fridays as well, or Thursdays, whatever day. And yeah, that's the prototype. Now, as for the testing phase, this would involve tracking a number of metrics. The first one would be new players, and this is pretty simple to do, I think. You could do something as simple as just asking players when they're buying the entry for the ping pong. You could ask them if they're new here, and then if they say yes, you could just give them a small piece of paper that says, "How did you hear about us?" And then just count those. And the second metric would be returning players, which would be as simple as counting the number of players you have on a certain day or a certain week, and comparing that to the players before, but you have to subtract the new players from the players now, so you only get the returning players. That way you can tell if you lost a lot of old players, which is important to see as well. Then another metric would be the profit on the new days that you're open, to see if more hours is a really viable option to keep expanding. And last but not least, you would track your profit on the days that you're usually open and see how much did more players help out. And now to implement, the timeline would look something like this. You would start with 2 or 3 halls, like for the prototype. This would have a limited reach, but you could see if it's working. And if it is, then you could move on to like 5 or more halls, communicate with more places in your area. And like this, you would be able to stagger more days. Then the next milestone after that would be when new players outnumber returning players. And this would signal the growth of the sport in the area. Then the next step after that would be implementing these solutions for most halls in the area. Now, this does not mean that everybody needs to be talking to everybody, but like, you know, everybody's listed on sites, and like at least they're collaborating with at least 1 or 2 other people in their area within like a 20-mile range, you know, whatever you define it as like an immediate area. And then the last, I guess, milestone / step would be to get new halls to open up, which signals growing demand. And then at this point, when there's growing demand, that means that you no longer need to limit your hours and coordinate which hours are going to be closed, you know? Because ideally, every place would have 7 days a week, because then you're making the most money. And that's it. If all these things happen, then that would be great for the sport. Thank you. Just the references.